Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is from OnSIP.com, and you can go to GetOnSIP.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about ZipDX.com, full color, full featured, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by Bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are from Voxbone.com.
Welcome everybody to VUC number 607 for August 19th, 2016, where not twins, but Duo. We will be discussing Google's new Duo video chat app. But before we get into that, we'd like to remind you of something very important, that if you're involved in the world of asterisk, IP, telecom, this sort of thing, you want to give some serious thought to going to the Astricon, Asterisk User Conference and Expo, the 27th to 29th of September in beautiful Glendale, Arizona at the Renaissance Glendale Hotel and Spa. It's a lovely place. I've been there twice myself. You will probably see a lot of people who you hear on the VUC at Astricon. Visit astricon.net for details. And now, Randy.
All right, Michael, thank you for that. And we're going to be talking about Google Duo today. It came out either yesterday or the day before. It's been rolling out around the world. And I believe the UK now has it. We'll get that report from James if he's here, or maybe Tim knows, whether it's on both. I don't know anything about iOS. Who's got iOS here? Tim, do you? I think you do.
I do. I have it on iOS, although as I was discussing with James, the older iPod Touch which I have stretches it somewhat. But yeah, no, I installed it, and I also have it on UK Android. So yeah.
It's actually working on my...
Have it here on Android. And Michael, yeah, go ahead. You got it on iOS, but you're in the U.S. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, also, and my iPod Touch is a 2015 model, so it's, I think, the current generation, in fact. But it was a little tricky getting it installed because it's an iPod Touch, and it wants to send an SMS to do the second factor auth, or at least in my Google profile, that's how it worked. So I had to enable a different form of second factor auth. And if you're seeing me now, you're actually seeing the capture of the Duo REST screen.
And can we try to? I'm going to select you for the focus, and I'm going to call you. You don't have to answer this. In fact, you shouldn't answer. Let's look at the early media, which is the big knock feature. And FIPO's with us as well. We're going to talk with you in just a second, but let's try to get this demo out of the way, this part.
Yeah, don't knock it, right?
Uh-oh.
So it's
so
early
far,
media. Yeah, no, we're seeing it, although your Wi-Fi just kind of... That's the thing, because it's mobile only, right? So it's Wi-Fi or 3G, 4G.
And it switches automatically, and it says, I have a message here saying my video is visible. I'm moving around purposely, making everybody dizzy.
Shall I answer the call at this point?
No, we don't want to go there because it'll screw up the audio. But in a minute, maybe you can make a call. But what I wanted to say about this was that mobile is not just about devices, but it's about context. And I'm sure Tim would agree with me here, and maybe everybody else will have other opinions. But one of the things you want to know is where somebody is. It's a good piece of information. So although we make fun of Knock Knock because it's early media, yawn, and we have that in SIP for years, it actually is a pretty good idea because you can see what the person is, where the person is, and maybe you don't feel like talking to them when they're on the beach, but you might want to talk to them if they're in their bedroom. I don't know. Don't read anything into that. Anyway, back to... all right, so FIPO, what device are you testing this thing on? Presumably you have had a good look.
Yeah, I have it on the iPhone. It rolled out 2 days ago in Norway, so I tried to get some captures of it.
Okay, and what's your initial impression?
Well, the first thing I stumbled up on was bugs in the German translation. So cut off the knock knock feature. The description of that just says live bit that ... which is kind of unfortunate.
Okay. Who else has? I can talk about call quality in just a moment, but I guess Andy Smith, you and James have spoken. What was your experience?
I like the bandwidth handling measures because I'm right on where I sit here in my office. I don't have a strong Wi-Fi signal, so it works quite well. And I got video occasionally. It grayed out and stopped occasionally, but the audio was always good. So yeah, initial impressions is that it's certainly usable. It's pretty good.
James, you're next.
Yeah, I've got it installed on an iPad and on an iPhone. Something I noticed, which is really quite bizarre, is that I set up the iPad using my US Google Voice number, and then it pre-selected a whole load of contacts based on that Google Voice number. The iPhone, then I set up with my UK cell number, and it selected a completely different set of people, and they're mutually exclusive. So yeah, that's a bit interesting. The other thing we noticed is that it seems to be quite sniffy about poor links. It seems to be very keen to drop the video when there's a slightly lumpy Wi-Fi signal, as we found out as Andy was wandering around his residence. But when there is good quality Wi-Fi, it's that the picture quality is absolutely super. So, Tim, do you know what codecs it's using for video and voice?
I don't. I'm assuming that it'll be using VP9 and Opus. I'd be shocked if it wasn't, but there's no guarantees. I suppose it might be using VP8. We haven't. It's so well. We'll get into the decryption and stuff in a minute, no doubt. But so on the context thing, I think you're right. I think it's quite interesting having a set of visual context, which you can, picture paints 1,000 words or whatever it is. I think that's true. You can learn a lot about the purpose of the call just by seeing somebody, but it doesn't actually tell you what the purpose of the call is, right? So I sort of find myself thinking, well, is this an adequate substitute for the fact there is no text messaging at all, right? So my normal thing now is I will have a text chat with somebody saying, what do you think about this? And then it will escalate to voice or video, or we'll say, is now a good time? Yeah. I'll put you on the big screen or whatever. And so that all that will happen in text pre-call. And then you'll get a bunch of stuff, we'll chat and whatever in the call, but quite often in the middle of it, somebody will say, did you see? And then there's a URL, and you drop it in as text chat. And then at the end of the call, there's this thing where you say, well, you remember what the damn book was called that you were talking about, and you drop it in the text chat. So there's a whole bunch of use cases around text chat, which I'm now used to with with Wire and all of the rest of them, Skype and whatever, that I find myself immensely missing in Duo. Now, whether that's because I'm the wrong age group, or I've used Skype too much, or what, I don't know. But it doesn't feel to me like it's a sufficient context to allow me to decide those things, or to complete the call in the way that I can satisfactorily in some of the other things. On the other hand, it's instant. There's I don't have to type, which is it's nice. So I'm sort of it's nice that it's different. I really like the fact that somebody's doing something different. I'm less keen on the fact that they're using conventional address books and that kind of stuff. Oh, look, I have a video call from some troublemaker.
Michael. It's Michael. I can see you connecting with Tim Panton now.
And there we are. I am connected in some complicated way. And I have no idea.
One frame every 3 seconds.
Really?
Well,
It's a
yeah,
little
and
bit.
I do wonder about poor connection.
Perfect. No, that's excellent. That we were able to obtain that as part of the demo, because that's what happens.
Yeah, and it goes on. It carries on audio only. And there's no manual control for this.
I want to emphasize that, at least in my case, it switched automatically off of Wi-Fi when when it found the Wi-Fi signal inadequate, it went to LTE by itself. Unfortunately, when you're on the edge, it'll do that back and forth a couple of times, and obviously the call is kind of useless. But that's an interesting thing. Another interesting thing that we didn't see there is that the call, when there's a problem with video, it will go to monochrome and then fade out. Did you see that, Fipo? You must have seen that, right?
Yeah.
So we've all had bad enough quality calls to witness the various ways that they are doing this. Go ahead, Fipo.
Yeah, I had a couple of calls with Chad Hart because we're looking at this for WebRTC hacks, and it turned out my call with him was connected here, so media over TCP. You can guess how that went.
Right. Can I ask two questions of anybody who wants to answer these? First of all, does FaceTime have text chat, Tim?
You're asking the wrong person.
No, it's iMessage is the text.
Well, I know, but I mean integrated into a single app. So
but it is kind of integrated.
Well, wait a second. So the other part of the same question, really, channeling Carl Fife, is what is the main thing that this is the Me Too version of? If it's FaceTime and FaceTime doesn't actually have an integrated chat, this is one of the instant call. It's also based on phone numbers, which I believe FaceTime is based on your Apple ID, but can be based on your phone number, I think, right?
It's actually both. It's E164 number and Apple ID, and you can have multiple aliases concurrently.
And you'll notice
I've got about 12 E164 numbers on mine. And
you'll notice that when you get a missed call, just like an SMS, there is when you get an SMS, there's an option to call the person back rather than or message. I'm sorry. Let me start over again. On the missed call, let me see if I can wake this up to remind myself. I have a missed call here from this James Bodie fellow, and that's that red. Can we get this in focus, please? Almost. Well, you see a red dot next to James's Sirius photo, and if I press on this, it's one thing, but the initial notification gave me an option to message him. And since I'm on, and here it is. Yeah, perfect. Here you go. Oh, if only. Well, it popped up. You saw it for almost a second. We'll do a stop frame on the video. Do that again, James. Let's see if we can.
Okay, yeah, here it comes. Here it comes. So this is me ringing.
Hello.
Hello.
Watch this now. Watch this now.
Hello. Hello.
Yes. I have to.
Early media.
Here comes the notification. Okay, hang it up. Oh, look at that. And the notification missed video, and you have the option to call or to message. So, that's a nice touch.
Yeah, I wouldn't put a huge amount of store on the fact that the Apple equivalent is two separate applications because they are so closely bound together within iOS or within OS X that it's not a problem at all. The one limitation there is with FaceTime and iMessage is that it's Apple only. So you have to have a foot in the blue camp, otherwise your messages end up being penal green.
Also, didn't somebody asked how come there isn't an Android version of FaceTime after all these years?
Well, because Android people are second-class citizens, clearly.
Besides that obvious fact. Anyway, what are we missing?
They're the people who can't afford to buy Apple devices. No, that'll get people going.
Oh, I'm sure it will. What else?
Yeah, I'm going to resist temptations to even think about that. What this does make me think of in a way that upsets me a lot is Join. It's
not Join. Oh,
it's as far as the user experience. No, that's wrong. As far as the nominal user requirements are concerned, this is actually quite close to Join, It's E164, pure video calling. It doesn't integrate into anything else. Like, the fact that over the transport it uses and the technology it uses is radically different. Like, leaving that, just parking that to one side for the moment, the use case it's trying to fill is very similar to Join. Now, I can't help feeling that that may actually be one of the reasons they built it. It's an internal turf war within Google about, listen, you guys, your Join thing, we can, 4 of us can knock up something better than that in a weekend, and here, look, it connects quicker as well. And I think there's an elephant of that in it, but that's wholly speculative and won't put me in the good books of the Google people if they were to hear this. But anyway, so James, tell us what Join actually is, and make it clear that I'm talking nonsense.
Well, Join is messaging, but coming from the other side of the wire, coming from the telephony world, from the ITU side of the fence, as opposed to the IETF side. So where the big movers and shakers are the telcos and big equipment manufacturers like Ericsson and Nokia, and it was defined by committees and really is pretty limited in its scope, what it can do, and nobody's actually really managed to deploy it successfully because it's just a load of rubbish, really.
Join, is Join sort of like the follow-on to RCS?
No, it's complementary. It's in parallel, and that's Join spelt J-O-Y-N.
I think it uses some of the same standards as RCS, James. It's just
Yes,
it's an attempt to justify the death of the trees that was necessary for.
Yeah,
for
it uses the same
RCS.
transport layer. You're absolutely right. So, yeah, but you probably can see I'm not exactly a huge fan of Join because it's just going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, so I mean, it's certainly interesting to see Duo, and I wonder who they are aiming it at. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody who I won't name, but who said, well, this is the sort of thing that I might well use with my family, who happen not to be, if they don't have FaceTime, I might use this instead. So it is, from that perspective, I think it is a FaceTime competitor. It's a really easy video chat.
Yeah, I think I concur with you. It's definitely aimed, I would say, at the lower end of the Android type market, where people don't want particularly powerful or sophisticated messaging clients. They want something that's really, really simple.
I think you're confusing lower end in terms of willingness to put up with complexity and visual stuff.
Yeah, I'm talking
and
about
price.
my wife and my mother-in-law. People like
but the people who spend second most on phones, in my experience, or even most on phones, are the, let's call them the fashionistas, who really care about what the thing looks like, but they don't want to have to spend a lot of time learning how to use the damn thing. So I think there's the thing.
Well, yeah, that's definitely my wife and mother-in-law. Definitely.
Right. Well. So my point is that I wouldn't confuse that with buying low-end phones. I think you'll find that those people spend serious money on Samsung phones and whatever. And
of course you're right. I was kind of thinking low-end on the intellectual scale. I mean, one of those moods today, aren't I?
You're just looking for trouble. You are.
Yeah, I've had a hard week. That's why.
Speaking of low end and looking for trouble, I would like to know how much FaceTime is used. In other words, what's its penetration, and also aren't all these technologies? I mean, Tim, you and I were saying yesterday that the only time we ever use video calls is in this situation where we need to test some app that just came out, and I want to know. How many people? Everybody's going to say, well, young people use it, but do they really use video chat? And isn't porn the only really good?
Yeah, within our family.
Isn't pornography the only really good reason to use it?
No.
Well, why do you want to see somebody's face talking to you? Oh, look at the nice disco ball. Why do you actually want to see it? Even the grandchildren example doesn't hold for very long. You only want to do that once, probably.
No, that's not true.
Starting to disagree. I'm now actually feeling slightly offended if people don't switch on video. Like if I'm in a wire or Skype call and somebody doesn't enable video, or I don't enable video, one has to make an excuse about why. You know, so either I haven't got the bandwidth, or I'm still wearing my pajamas, or whatever.
Yeah, but look at you're comparing from the sound of it, you're comparing a conference like the one we're in right now, where I really want the video, and I want to see what people are doing, especially since I just enabled the film strip, so everybody can see you all the time on YouTube Live. Because we have such an illustrious panel, I figured I would share that with everybody. We should also redo the demo for people who may be joining late. So, Michael, can you put your screen back on, and I will reinitiate a call, because I think some people have joined late. So I'm going to bring up the Duo app, which looks like so. You can see, well, you can't see me because I'm pointing it at the camera. I'm going to call Michael. He's doesn't need to answer. It says my video is visible, and I'm going to move around. And now you're getting better. So here I am, moving around the world.
Now, one of the things I wonder about this is, because I am running this on an iPod Touch, it probably has significantly less CPU grunt than any recent generation iPhone.
Seems to be working pretty well at the moment.
Yeah, and I did put up a local Wi-Fi access point, and it with a 5 gigahertz link, and it's the only device on it. So it's got kind of assured bandwidth.
By the way, let me do that again and see if I can change the camera. I think you can.
Yeah, you can. I've done that, actually.
Oh.
I could answer it.
I think you have to be in the call to do it.
Yeah, because you don't get.
Somebody else will have to try that. And also the settings, which I showed a still of someplace, but the settings, which have my phone number, so I won't show it. You can unregister a phone number, because obviously we all jumped on this thing. There you go. Obviously we all jumped on this thing. Well, your phone number's on there, so if you may not want to do that.
Yeah. That's why I put it away very quickly.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's very readable on the little film strip. Anyway, what else? Fipo, what else you got to say? Remember your mother's advice if you can't say anything good, and be sure to unmute.
Well, I could say a lot of non-good things probably, but I was quite surprised when I did some packet dumps, and it's quite easy to see that it has Opus as an audio codec. No big surprise here. And for video, I saw it using the RAD codec, so redundant video data, which hides the fact whether it's VP8 or VP9, unfortunately. So I don't know yet.
So is that a codec? I'm not familiar with that. Is that a codec that sort of, is that an error correction wrapper around one of the VP codecs?
Yes. Basically, you encapsulate the VP8 and VP9 packets inside that. Then you can send it multiple times. Chrome likes doing that. That's how they get rate up very fast.
Whereas Opus does the other way around. It handles the redundancy within the codec itself.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I already saw it really ramping up very fast. I mean, we can see that the video quality during the initial seconds during the knock-knock phase is very good. So they obviously spend a lot of effort on that. And it works.
Is the fact that it's running on the Touch, does that imply something? It's clearly quite different hardware from the iPhone or an Android phone. It won't load on a Nexus 7 tablet, even though it's running the current OS. It just says it's not compatible with that device.
No, I didn't even try that. That's interesting. Yeah, no. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't run on tablets or the Touch. But technically, I would have thought. I mean, there's graphical layout issues with tablets that the screens are different, and you you actually end up having to do another batch of graphical layout, which is why you'll find that sometimes it comes in later for apps. And then, I mean, I've always found the iPod Touch a perfectly usable device for testing iOS stuff. The only thing, obviously, it doesn't do SMS, and it doesn't. The microphone selection thing is subtly different from on a real iPhone. There are fewer audio routes than there are on a real iPhone, so it's subtly different in that respect. But yeah, and the thing I noticed most in testing it yesterday is that on my old device, Duo gets through the battery in no time at all. And in fact, even more, I mean, surprisingly, I found that it gets through the battery on my Nexus 5X faster than my Mac can charge it. So I was actually plugged into the Mac's keyboard. Now, okay, that's probably limited to half an amp or something. But I was plugged into the Mac's keyboard, and during a call, the battery went out. So I was quite surprised that it's drawing, when it's running, it's drawing over half an amp, which is impressive. But I mean, I guess rendering video and screen at full brightness and CPU and all the rest of it isn't totally surprising.
Well, I'm just looking at the battery usage on my my Nexus here, and I've only used Duo for one call, and that's a call to James, and that wasn't very long. It was only about 4 or 5 minutes, and it's actually used 5% of my battery in total already. So it is definitely a heavy battery use, which may make its usefulness somewhat less than it would otherwise be. But on the other hand, going back to the argument whether you want video or not, I speak to James quite often, and if he rings me, he will also always do so with video. But when I ring him, I tend to do so with audio, and that might be because I'm still in a dressing gown or whatever, but it also because it allows me to do other things without paying attention to the phone. I don't actually have to stare at the phone all the time. I can just stick it in my pocket. And that's not an incidental thing. That's quite important to me. So from this aspect, having the ability to be able to drop to just voice would be good.
Now, I agree with you on the dressing gown thing. There are many things that you can't unsee, obviously, and you and your dressing gown is probably one of them. I just wanted to mention here, and so Michael reached me. I changed my phone number, so I unregistered the old and registered to my Google Voice number, which actually flashed briefly on the screen a few minutes ago. But that's a number that doesn't matter because it never rings anywhere. So that's an interesting point. Is it just took a second to re-register the which camera am I looking at? Re-register the call. Also, I'm seeing myself centered. Michael, you made this comment too. Is that the round thing is a little confusing because you can't quite see what you're trying to do. The round version of it.
The little round icons sort of obliterate the corners, which sometimes makes it just difficult to kind of see everything that you want to see in that.
And now you can see that the number is obscured more or less. You can see the first 3 and then another.
Only if you actually put on the screen you can actually see the number. If in the contact list.
Yeah, when I was calling, you do. Yeah. So I don't know. You may not have had that number.
I did not.
Or it's interesting to figure out what exactly they're doing with the contacts and where they're getting them. Obviously, anything to do with Google, they've got that all of that already, and you've already signed in basically to any of that when you sign in and register your phone. So I don't know.
Well, it asks explicitly for permission to use the iOS contacts as well, and it basically won't let you do anything until you give it permission.
Yeah, and I think it did ask on the Android phone, and it makes it clear that it's going to take your entire contact list. That's, I guess, on the resident on the phone too, right?
On a regular basis, it says as well. It's not even just once, which is kind of interesting. I mean, my attitude is that Google already have that, so whatever. But yeah, but I'm not. It seems a trifle gung ho with that, but it probably isn't a thing that people care about.
Yeah, except that
especially-
every time you log into Twitter or any other thing these days, it asks you for your phone. Facebook. Every time I've ever gone into Facebook, it's asking for a phone number, which I've never given them, and I don't see any good reason to do so.
Yeah. Speaking of security, Fippo and I had an inconsequential analysis of the packets to try and understand what's going on, and it's. I think it's fair to say that it isn't plain WebRTC.
Right. It isn't playing standard WebRTC, at least.
It doesn't meet the musts and shoulds that are in the draft IETF document about what the transport should look like. I mean, it obviously isn't WebRTC because WebRTC's got a JavaScript API that you can program in a browser, so it's kind of clearly not that. But the other end of the question is actually quite interesting. Is it over the wire using the WebRTC standards? Now, I mean, I suppose in a sense you don't actually really care, but it's kind of thing that we nerd out about because it's interesting. And the answer is, looking at the logs, it isn't. Pretty obviously isn't, and in sort of odd ways, which I don't yet understand.
Yeah, same here. So what we're seeing, what we expected to see was a DTLS handshake over UDP, because that is exchanging the keys for SRTP, and that is what we see in every WebRTC call. And we don't see that in Duo, and that surprised us. I mean, one of the disadvantages, which is known since Facebook Messenger, is that this DTLS handshake costs 2 or 3 round trips, so it costs time, which Google wants to use to ramp up the video quality during knock knock. And that is probably the reason why they are working around that, really.
So our current working assumption, which is no more than that, I think, is that they probably are doing DTLS, but they're doing something odd about the handshake. One simple thing they could be doing is sending the handshake over the signaling initially. I mean, the other possibility is that they could be running the handshake over turn over TLS. So they could be setting up a TLS connection to a turn server and then running the initial few packets over that, and then switching to UDP when it works. I mean, given the way that the thing is encrypted, it's actually pretty hard to see what's going on. One thing I did notice is there's an awful lot of UDP packets, some of which seem to be sent out in threes, which seemed rather strange, of the same length, almost simultaneously, to different IP addresses, which I couldn't. And this seems to go on not throughout the call, but on a regular basis. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I think it may be testing other paths so that it could fold over to them instantly.
Yeah, I think it's a sounding thing, so that the client can assess the latency and thereby quality through different media proxies.
Maybe, but they seem to be bigger packets than would be in. I mean, they seem to be full-size packets, but I would need to look at this properly to be sure. But there's quite a lot going on there, and I had hoped to try and get Google to talk about what it was, but they have declined to so far. They think it's that we should work a bit harder, which is, fair enough, I suppose.
Challenged.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We know that Google has been working on a lot of stuff like preferring relay servers first, even though I haven't seen that. So I had a call with a coworker. We were local only, and I didn't see any turn servers, and I still didn't see any turn TLS connection.
Okay.
So it must be hidden somewhere in the signaling layer. I saw DTLS close packets when the call ended, so they are using DTLS. They're not using SDES, which is very confusing.
So yeah, there's been some talk in the IETF standards about doing this this kind of early start of DTLS by handling the first packets in the signaling, and I'm dead set against it. I think it's an ugly piece of design, but I understand the motivation, so we'll see how it plays out. But so I mean, the summary of all that is that they've done some technically interesting things in the way that they've done this setup. And the other thing to bear in mind is that they appear to be running turn servers in several geographic locations. As far as I can see, in Google's own cloud infrastructure, which is interesting in itself, because as I was, like, one of the Google Cloud salespeople said to me, if you want the lowest latency, you probably want to put it in a Google data center, because all of your ISPs want to have Google lookups to happen quickly. So they'll tend to try and make sure that path is reasonable, and if your turn server is sitting next to that, then that's going to be good for you. Now, whether that's actually plausible or not, I don't know. But it's clear that nobody's going to restrict bandwidth to Google, because it would be it would show up immediately in slow searches, which is like visibly embarrassing. So it's an interesting strategy. So they've done a lot of interesting technical work in this. Personally, I'm not wholly wedded to the design. I think, I'm yet to know if there are users for it, but since there are users for FaceTime, there probably are. And I kind of regret that they've not made some of these design decisions public, but they may do at some point.
Pretty early days, though, really, isn't it? I mean, the thing just came out. I know they've been working on it for a long time, and the other side, the other app is Allo. I already forgot what it does, but we're waiting on that one, too. I received a notification, by the way, because I asked for it on the App Store. I don't know if all of you were that excited about it, but the notification came. I think, Fipo, you had it before I even got notified that it was available, so I don't know what the deal is there. Why is that? You're some kind of favorite status?
I don't know. I certainly would expect me to be least favorite by now, because it was clear what was going to happen. I was going to complain.
Of course. And by the way, Tim, I don't know if you saw this, but Justin Uberti did, he answered and would have come today. We did invite him. I wanted to mention that, because we could have discussed some of the internals a little bit more, maybe. But he wasn't available. He's not in the office today. We may see him next week. I'm not sure. But in any case, hopefully that'll happen in the near future.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good to try and hear some of their reasoning behind these decisions, because I think there are some interesting design decisions. And, we'll only find out in terms of how successful those design decisions were, based on how many people sign up for it and use it on a regular basis.
And modest humility forbids me from saying that they actually would benefit from hearing from us too.
The thing that gets me about it is it's going to take some time, right? Because this is the first week. There'll be a bit of a splash. Let's see in 90 days what the actual usage amounts to.
Yeah, they might change that circle to a square.
But there's going to be a lot of people like us who try it, tinker with it, play with it, move on, right? There's just so many tools. Is it okay if
the game, just briefly, the game there, though, is if they can get it to a certain level of popularity, they may get it attached to the dialer. The big possible win here is if they can get the dialer to work in the same way that iMessage does. That when you're when you're SMSing somebody on an iPhone, and it happens that they're connected on iMessage, then it will deliver it over iMessage and not over the SMS infrastructure. Now, they have an opportunity here with the dialer on Android, at any rate, to embed it in the Android dialer and say, if you both happen to be available on Duo, then we'll use that rather than the carrier infrastructure.
Sure.
And you'll get a video call. And they're in a unique position to be able to at least attempt that.
But Android also has the possibility of using something else for messaging, so that's another possibility. They may go that way.
That's true, but the user interface is set up in such a clumsy way that it's not easy to do that. Whereas you compare that with the Apple.
Whereas you're forced by Apple to do what they want you to do. So thank you.
Well, didn't they kind of do that with the Hangouts app though? Because there was a time when the Hangouts app for Android wasn't the default SMS client, and then all of a sudden it was, and you had to go set it otherwise, which meant I don't know about the dialer specifically, but it meant that it was more closely integrated with the basic function of the phone.
Well, there you go. You see, I think that they have an opportunity to do that, but for that to work, they have to get a reasonable uptake in terms of like, look, this thing works, and B, they have to fight a load of battles. Three things. Then they have to fight a load of battles internally against the people who paid out a lot of money for a joint company within Google, and then they have to fight battles with the carriers who have to admit that this is a good idea because they can sell more data. So there's quite an interesting set of balancing games that go on there. And I may be completely wrong. They may have no aspirations in that direction whatsoever. But, it's all speculation. But it's much more fun to speculate without Justin telling us we're wrong.
Absolutely. What is Allo, by the way? Somebody remind me? Is it a chat? It's a chat, isn't it?
It's chat, and it's partially end-to-end encrypted, which is the feature.
Which is Wire 2 years later, or what?
Well, it will tell Google some things you tell it. So they can have chatbots integrated, and I think end-to-end encryption is not enabled by default for that reason. We'll see.
I wonder if there's no connect. These are two different teams, right? As far as we know.
I think Justin Uberti is on both teams.
So what if this was the answer? What if this was the answer to the chat and video integration? I don't know. There may be a way.
Yeah, I think that's also quite likely. Assuming that they'd be crazy to be using incompatible infrastructure.
So then we'll have Wire 3 years later from Google.
Yeah. But with the ability to get it installed on every single Android handset that gets shipped, which is subtly different from Wire's position. But conversely, Wire is legally based in Switzerland and is covered by German data protection laws, which neither of which apply to Google. So it's slightly apples and oranges from the legal point of view.
Yes.
And that's what a super segue for me talking about Apple. Apples and oranges, very good. Do you remember when Apple launched their iMessage and FaceTime bits and pieces? Steve Jobs stood up and made a big point of talking about the whole guts of the thing being open standard, and made a big play on the openness. And this picture I'm showing is one of the slides in his presentation. So all of the stuff there that actually make FaceTime work, they're all pretty, they're commodity bits and pieces. But the way it turned out was completely, not open, in that all of the Apple stuff is cryptographically protected using Apple cryptographic key variables, which are held in the secure part of the device, and the only way that you can get access to those sets of cryptographic key variables is to buy an Apple device, which means
they have a small excuse, which is that shortly after that they released FaceTime, they got hit with a patent suit, which they lost, which was around carrying real-time data over VPN, over automatically set up VPNs, and they lost that. There was a point where they had to completely re-architect FaceTime to avoid being damaged to avoid having punitive damages for that patent suit. So I think their view was then that they weren't prepared to risk that again, so they didn't talk about how the second version worked, except to assure the judge that it didn't violate this patent. So I kind of understand how it happened. I think it's immensely regrettable, and I suspect that if Steve been around a bit longer, he would have just done it anyway. But they weren't in a position to do it right then because they had this court case where they lost a lot of money, and there was a point when they had to pay every month for violating it until they'd rebuilt FaceTime so it didn't, which was a painful thing.
Who was the winner?
I don't recall. It's something I could Google.
I think they were called Vernet X.
Vermin. Did you say Vermin?
Vermin.
Vermin X. Pretty ratty, if you ask me.
Chris Kuhnke has a blog post on them. Let me see. Yeah, WebRTC fans prepare to meet Vernet X or Vermin. Yeah, it was. Apple got sued in 2012 and had to pay 368 millions, which is quite a lot.
Oh, come on. That's lunch money for Apple. In fact, that's like only 1 week's lunch money.
Yeah, but there's this whole thing of punitive damages, whereas if you carry on infringing, it kind of goes up exponentially. So you need to avoid being in contempt of court and carrying on doing it. Oh look, they're back again. There's Apple's FaceTime is subject to renewed patent infringement lawsuit, 24th of June 2016. So people are back. Straight Path are doing something about it. So it's an ugly old space, yes, Vernex were the people in 2012.
I prefer Vermin, actually.
Well, yeah, but James, they have very well-funded lawyers, so I would be careful.
I'm in one of those moods today. Yeah.
Well, yes, but let's not be suicidal about it. Like, no. It's not like they have a track record of forgiving people their misdemeanors.
Well, here I'm on Apple's side. I feel very, very warm towards Apple at this moment in time for some inexplicable reason.
You're gearing up to buy a new MacBook, perhaps?
Well, no, new iPhone shortly. Looking forward to that.
With no headphone socket, allegedly.
Really? Oh, well, that's a bit of a downer, isn't it? But it'd be interesting to see.
Buy stock in headphone makers. They're going to reap tons of reward.
Yeah, well, if there's no headphone socket, it means they're going to have to put a really, really good wireless headset in the box.
No, they'll just they'll put one that plugs into the. They'll put a cruddy headset that plugs into the Lightning port, and then you can't have it charging up and using a headset at the same time, unless you're on Bluetooth, which is like, I get it, I understand.
Unless it's a pass-through plug, which we've seen those before.
There's already all kinds of talk about how this is going to be ridiculous, and anybody who, because you're going to have. Well, there's already, I think there's a standard that says you can pass analog audio across a couple of connectors on the Lightning port. I'm not sure about Lightning. There definitely is in USB 3, and so there are already a couple of Android phones that only have a USB 3 port. But you can get a little adapter that you plug in that gives you a 3.5 mil jack. Who knows what's going to happen? They're going to obsolete a whole bunch of phones and sell a whole bunch of little adapters, and people are going to make money. It's going to be an enormous pain. But
yeah, well, I would put money on them bringing out a really good Apple-engineered wireless headset.
Yeah, Beats. I don't think so.
They've got the Beats stuff isn't bad. I mean, it's pretty industrial in terms of design, but if you take the guts of a Beats headset and then put it into something designed by Johnny Ive, I mean, the end result could be quite good.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Actually, the Beats stuff that I've encountered, and it's been a handful, has been schlocky and overpriced. And so I'm just not a fan. And so, on the other hand, there's all kinds of people out there. When Bose, who actually does a decent job of noise-canceling headsets, their latest one is Bluetooth capable, it's the first, and also wired capable, and that's probably pretty compelling for a lot of people.
I bought one of those the other day. For
What, a
small
Bose one?
daughter.
Do you
I
like it?
want one.
I never get my hands on it. It's not for me though. So.
Oh, we've heard that one before.
Interesting device. It's over the ear rather than on ear, and I actually prefer on ear. But
Yeah, and I prefer in the ear. Which, again, Apple does a dreadful job of. So.
Oh yeah, I hate those things. Hey, can we get back to a Duo for just a second? I just installed it on my wife's phone, Android phone, and just a note here that when you give your real phone number, it pre-fills the phone number. You all saw that even on Apple, I guess, right? But it also pre-fills it takes the SMS that you receive and pre-fills the validation number, whatever, the verification number. Did that happen on iOS? I don't think so.
So it did it on Android. It did it faster. It filled the thing in before I'd seen that there was a message.
Exactly.
It literally filled it in before the notification of the message, which was kind of cool in an odd sort of way.
On Android.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what just happened on this phone, and however, I didn't find myself in her contacts. I don't know.
Well, maybe you should be making dinner tonight.
Yeah, no, really, that's.
I have
nice Californian bottle of wine and dinner recommended, I think.
Probably, yeah, Zinfandel. Ooh, the camera's jiggling because it's on a stack of books. What else? We can complete our topic of Duo.
Not Duo, but Jitsi. I have a Jitsi thought.
Oh.
Have you seen this article that just posted today, which sort of celebrates the fact that HipChat has video conferencing integration, and surprise, surprise, it looks a lot like Jitsi Video Bridge.
Of course it will.
Well, of course it will, won't it?
And
it's the hand of Emil.
Yeah, the magic there is that they beat Slack to the punch, which HipChat and Slack are competitors there. So kudos
but only
to
because they've got Emil.
Yeah.
The size of a planet and maintained by multiple breakfasts. We know how this works.
How much penetration does HipChat have compared to other similar things?
It doesn't have the press, but they claim to have the user base.
I think it started out very well. We used to use HipChat before Slack came along, and the thing about Slack is it's so much easier to integrate it into other message flows that's what sold it to us, and the user interface possibly at the time was slightly better. So we went over to Slack, didn't we, Andy?
Yeah, we did. And there were some other more personal reasons for doing that at the time as well, though. In that at the time when Slack first appeared was just after Emil had gone over to Atlassian, and we were waiting for him to come up with his new product. So as it's there now, there's a good chance we may even revert.
Yeah, indeed, we might slip back to HipChat. So is the new HipChat out now? Because I haven't seen it. Because we ought to have a look at that.
Actually, we probably should be testing HipChat, and then we'll get Emil on and do something with it.
And Jana.
But at the same time, we've already seen Slack play with temporal scalability in simulcast, which, as far as I know, even Emil hasn't cracked. So I'm not sure how far they are ahead of HipChat now.
He said something about simulcast.
Simulcast they've got. Simulcast they've had for a little while now.
Yeah.
Temporal scalability I'm not sure about. But.
Yeah, he was at ClueCon last week, and I think he said they don't have temporal scalability yet. But then it's not that hard if you know how to do it.
Yeah, you just have to slip that one in, don't you?
Yeah, it's just filtering packets. They know how to do that.
For those of us who weren't at ClueCon.
It's all SVC. It's all SVC or derivative of that. So it's a known quantity. It just takes, as you say, brain the size of a planet. Bits. Don't ask me about bits.
Don't ask me about breakfast.
Yeah, no, I wandered into the ITF meeting a that actually it turned out that that Emil was chairing, and I foolishly hadn't planned my day very well, and got there thinking I was going to have breakfast in the ITF meeting hotel on the way in, and
let me guess, he'd eaten it all.
well, that may have been indeed what happened because I couldn't find anything, and so I sat there for an hour and a half with some weak coffee, surrounded by some brilliant brains talking about Ice Bis, the new version of Ice, and I was like, it was hard on the old brain. It was more than I could cope with. On the other hand, it was very useful because I've been using it recently I'm doing a little Ice implementation right now, so it was good to catch up on the latest things in Ice and what everybody's thinking and how to approach stuff and whatever.
Yeah. On the subject of Ice and messaging, just before the show kicked off, I managed to talk to Simon previously from Buddy Cloud, and it turns out that he has switched his Buddy for sound, so he's now working for SoundCloud, and in particular, he's now putting the messaging functionality into the SoundCloud client, which again is an interesting little messaging-related twist, isn't it?
Where's he based?
Still in Berlin. So
Right.
He said next time we're in Berlin, we'll have to pop in and have a barbecue on the roof of the SoundCloud.
That was Simon. Who? Simon
Tennant.
Of course, yes. Cool. Oh well, I should. Next time I'm in Berlin, I
Take up on
shall
that.
ping him.
Yeah,
and
but
see what he's
his
up to.
background, I mean, he was doing Buddy Cloud, 10 years ago on Symbian, and what a cracker of an application that was, but it never really took off.
Well, that would be Symbian for you.
Has he ever
Speaking-
been? Has
speaking
Simon
of
ever
which-
been on VUC? It sounds familiar to me. That name.
I think he has.
I can't remember what for.
Yeah,
We should get
yeah.
them on. Sure, I'm on SoundCloud big time. I have several, many accounts.
Which reminds me, and just going back to Ice, he was actually in Reykjavik in Iceland, bizarrely enough, and I talked to him on Duo. He was my test call. Here's a question for you, Randy. If we ended up suddenly and inexplicably playing a bit of your music, would that get us closed down for copyright?
On what? On this?
Yeah, on this show.
No. On this channel, I think it's okay.
If we suddenly had a burst of
If
woman
you
in
could make
white.
it good quality.
Yeah, well,
Otherwise, they may mistake it from a Randy California song.
So I, whilst James is setting that up, as a piece of nostalgia, I dug this thing out, which was supposedly the follow-on to
is that a 770?
It is indeed a 770. This is
Yeah.
the great white hope of following up from Symbian. This is going to be the Symbian killer.
Oh,
And
I've
it's
got a couple.
actually, it's sort of oddly usable with the single exception of this damn stylus and the fact that it's too slow. But
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of-
have a small bag of devices here. I think I've got a couple in here.
No,
So
here we go.
I got this out because I needed something sacrificial to take out to the desert where I don't actually care if I lose it or it dies or something. So I'm rounding up devices I don't care about, and this is, although actually I sort of almost like it, but yeah, no, interesting piece of.
Does it work as a phone still?
No. It works as a SIP phone. It works as quite a decent SIP phone, actually, weirdly. And it's got the thing I've got it for is it's a tablet that runs X out of the box, so I can talk to my Linux machines and get X terminals off it and whatever on something where I have a screen that fits in my pocket, which is kind of nice.
Hey, before we go, Tim, are you going to try to check in next week?
I will attempt it. Bodie
In
and I
fact,
were
we have a
discussing this.
wager. don't
How would
we?
you rate the chances, though? 10%?
Well, I was prepared to risk a pink drink, paying a pink
Yeah,
drink.
a wager of
voting
a pink drink.
if
to
I don't
be-
make it into, but timing-wise, it's into by the end of the VUC. Oh, that's the 880 or something, 800,
This
88.
is the N800.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you, Tim, maybe you can text or email or whatever the wire or whatever just before, so we'll hold it open for you or something.
Well, it will only be just before because I get in on Thursday night, and I will then set up some kind of communication channel. But it may, depending on various random factors, that may not be possible until later. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it'll be a lot of fun to swing by next week.
We'll look forward to that. I'm not quite sure what's happening. Justin may come in next week, but we'll determine that afterwards. But it's the time, the arbitrary time when we usually cut off. Anybody have any last words before we do?
So Fitbo hasn't really introduced himself. He should have a word about what he's doing these days.
That's a good point.
Well, it's been a while since I've been on the VUC. I think it was 2 years ago.
2 jobs ago.
Well, 2 jobs ago as well, yeah. I moved to San Francisco and then decided, nope, no San Francisco for me, and now it's Norway. Oslo is really nice. So now
It is in the summer. Wait until you get to the winter.
Well, in the winter I can go snow kiting, or I go to the place where they filmed episode
Now, do
5.
you do that? Do you do that? Because I was one of the first people on the planet to do that.
Ooh.
Back in the early 90s when I was, or late 80s, early 90s when I was seriously into kites. But I didn't do the snow kiting stuff as much because I didn't like the cold. I have a land sailor. I had a little New Zealand made a Peter Lynn land sailing buggy.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff.
You should bring that out to Burning Man. You'd have a hoot with that there. Flat, dry lake bed, perfect.
Yeah, but the place I prefer to go is a dry lake called Ivanpah, just outside of Las Vegas. But it now has the world's largest solar boiler operation on it.
Is that the thing that set itself on fire the other day?
Yeah, because a couple of their mechanized mirrors that track the sun, and a couple of the mirrors, the motors jammed, and when they were supposed to turn down to avoid overheating things, they actually stayed focused on the tower and burned up the tower.
What melted it?
Bits of it, yeah. It does, however, generate a tremendous amount of power in what is basically a dry, flat desert. Anyhow, so what have you been doing? Your job, you were saying.
Well, I work for...
Norway's lovely, but...
Norway's lovely. Telenor is, well, a big telco. No surprise. So I'm working with the Empyrean folks, so we see a lot of teenagers using us in Norway. And they use video chat in strange ways, and it's quite interesting. And I can keep pushing Google and find new bugs in their stuff, which is always fun.
So are people mostly using Empyrean? I mean, I can't remember. I think you've got an Android and iOS clients as well now, as well as just doing it in the browser. How's the distribution between those three platforms?
Well, we see 90% in the browser because we're about meetings and not about one-on-one calls, and then the browser is just the device of choice, desktop client.
So it's. I was going to say, how do tablets figure in that? Is that something that people do on tablets or not?
Not that much.
Okay, interesting.
Interesting things I just saw earlier today is that we have a totally different distribution of users and operating systems during weekdays and during the weekend. So during the week it's 30% Mac, during the weekend 15%. Mac is taking over the enterprise, it seems.
Jawohl.
Fascinating. That's interesting. So it should. But yeah. Cool.
All we bright and imaginative, creative people. Hey, Tim?
Well, I like to have a mix of devices.
Well, so do I.
But yeah, getting work done on the Mac is still the most effective place for me. I get more done on the Mac than I do on anything else. Although the Raspberry Pi is starting to look like a platform I could work with now.
Yeah, I tend to find I get chatted up more on the train as well with a Mac rather than a PC.
You're
Really?
just not carrying the right PC then.
Well, I just
I find that this makes conversation on the train. But there you go.
I think it probably makes laughter on the train. Particularly if it's connected to the Lego dog.
Yeah, put a countdown display on it and then Velcro it to the side of like some box on the train.
No.
Thank you, Michael, for your good advice. I shan't be following it.
That is a really, really bad idea.
Okay, I've been trying to end this thing for a while. We can keep going privately, but I want to thank our special guest, people. You know, you're always welcome. You should come by more often. Don't wait 2 years next time.
I won't.
Okay. And also our special guest, Andy Smith, who we never see.
I'm here all the time. I'm not a special. I'm not a special anything other than I'm lots of trouble, usually.
I think you're quite special, Andy.
Yeah, okay. Let's not continue down that line before I say something I'll regret.
You true phone guys. All the modesty in the world. Tim Panton is off next week to foreign lands, and Michael, thanks for the great production that you put together, because we were able to actually demo Google, maybe one of the first online actual video demos of it live. Anyway, certainly. Did I not thank James? Thank you, James. You're always brilliant.
I love you too.
Oh.
And can I remind everybody to go out and download Randy's albums on Deezer, iTunes, and everything else, so that he can afford to live in his senior years.
That's going to be a big problem, because those streaming revenues add up to about 12 cents a year. Okay, everybody, this is it. We'll pull the plug, and we'll see you next week. Thanks to everybody who participates in this thing on IRC and all that, and we'll see you next week.